what it is, boys. We are going to be ranking every melee weapon for the Zealot Preacher. Sorry I couldn't do guns. The Zealot just has access to way too many weapons, so I split it into 2 videos. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the ranged one that will be coming out in just a couple of days. As with all the other tier videos that I've done for the other classes, feel free to check those out, by the way. I want to quickly start by clarifying that absolutely all of these weapons are fireable. It doesn't matter what difficulty either, whether it's damnation or whatever, they are all 100% fireable. This is just a list on the ones that are more powerful than the others, so please do not start attacking people for using the ones that are in F tier, and please don't feel bad for using the ones that are in F tier. They're all good weapons in their own rights. With that said, if you think I'm wrong in any way, shape or form, I'd love to know why, but please give a detailed explanation as to why you think the weapon's in the incorrect place, and not just call me stupid and say that I'm wrong. Now, with all of that said, we're going to start with our first weapon, the Combat Blade, and we're going to be sticking this into A tier. Reason being that when you run the crit bleed build on the Zealot, this is an incredibly powerful build to be running. You are damn near invincible and you do pretty respectable single target DPS. Where it falls a little flat on its face is in its ability to deal with groups, and especially hordes. You have more or less nothing to deal with that. You have fantastic mobility, however, great defense. All in all, you basically become this like unkillable little Sonic the Hedgehog machine running around bleeding everything like crazy. On that note, if you are going to run the Combat Dagger, you absolutely must be running Lacerate or Flesh Tear, or heck, even both, to be piling on bleeds like a lunatic and melting even Ogryns. However, I believe mixing Lacerate with something like Shred is probably the most balanced and powerful combination of blessings that you can get on this weapon. And then coming up second is the Rashad Mark II Combat Axe. Anyone who's seen any of my other tier videos will know exactly where this one's going. And it's going straight into F. I cannot personally see anywhere to recommend taking this over one of the other combat axes. It has, in my opinion, one of the worst movesets for its weapon type. However, if you do like it and you want to go with it, I highly recommend trying it with Brutal Momentum and pair that with something like Decimator or Thrust. Now we have the tack axes. There are 3 of them. It comes in the Mark II, 4 and 7. Honestly, I don't really have a favorite among these. The movesets are very similar. They have some unique differences between them that might make one better for clearing hordes, one better for killing elites. I've tried them a fair bit. I still haven't come up with a favorite myself, so I think all of these are great in their own right. And we're going to be placing these in B. Because in my opinion, they basically do everything that the dagger does, but just a little worse in my opinion. I really do like them. I think they're fantastic for what they are, and they can play that crit bleed build extremely well, but the dagger just comes out ahead in every aspect of that build for me. So we're going to put them in B. That's going to be all 3 of them as well. For blessings, I highly recommend taking Brutal Momentum with any other combination of something that increases your damage. Moving on to the Cadia MK IV Assault Chainsword, and I know some people are going to hate this, but I'm putting it in F. And there's a very good reason for that. First of all, we have the Eviscerator on the Zealot. So if you're going to be using a chainsword, it's obviously going to be that one. Though the chainsword itself has a very fast attack pattern that's quite fun to use, I find that the push attack is just the worst in the game. It suffers from not being able to cleave through too many targets, and as fun as chainsawing a target in half is, and I get it, it's a really cool mechanic and it's very 40k in what it is, but locking yourself down into an animation for like 1 second or 1.5 seconds is almost always a sketchy thing to do, even when you think it's safe. You lock onto that crusher with the special and you're chainsawing through him, sniper pops up and you go straight back to the respawn point. I know it doesn't happen a lot, but it's just not worth taking that risk when you can do more or less the same damage in the same time by just donking it on the head a few times with an axe. And as far as blessing recommendations go, Savage, Sweet and Rampage can help this feel a lot more usable. Okay, now the heavy swords. We have the Mark 6, 7 and the 9. There are 3 variants here, and I'm going to rank the 9 higher than the 6 and the 7. And we're going to start with the 9. We're popping that in A tier, with the 6 and the 7 going into B tier. The reason that I've put the 9 above the other 2 is that the moveset for that weapon is just infinitely better at clearing hordes than the other 2. They have much more vertical sweeps in their light attack and heavy attack patterns, which I'm not a big fan of. And I feel that this weapon really excels at horde clearing, so having those horizontal head level swipes on the Mark 9 just make it stand up above the others. I actually recently did a Pirate Corsair style build for the Zealot with this, a full damnation run on my channel. I'll try and link it somewhere on the screen now, which I've never done before, so forgive me if it's a mess. And when taking this weapon, interestingly, you're able able to take a lot of ignore enemy hit mass blessings on this weapon. However, I highly recommend trying to get your hands on either Brutal Momentum or Death Blow. Devastating Strike is not as reliable as the other two. I really don't think it's actually that good in comparison. And then coupling that with something like Rampage or Head Taker, you end up with something that is just able to mincemeat hordes, even on Damnation. It's incredibly fun to use. But it has a downside. It basically cannot do anything to armor whatsoever. It has 0 armor handling capabilities, which is mainly the only reason it's not in S tier. Fantastic, fantastic weapon. Check out the video. Definitely try that build if you're looking to try something new and fun. Okay, so coming up, an iconic weapon for the Zealot, the Eviscerator. The two-handed chainsword is a butt ton of fun, and I use this weapon a lot. And I did like it, but it does have some similar shortcomings as the chainsword. For that reason, I'm going to be placing it in B, but let me explain real quick why before you tell me how wrong I am. Because though I love how this sword feels, and to be honest, it has probably the best push attack, heavy attack combo out of any weapon I've seen, like other chain weapons, it has a tendency to get stuck on enemies with higher hit mass and go into like a chainsaw animation. It feels really sticky, like you get stuck on enemies. And then, of course, the special ability to chainsaw stuff in half again is a bit of a bait on higher difficulties, because locking yourself in position like that can more often or not lead to a lot of avoidable damage, if not just death. Again, for the DPS output, it's just not quite worth it. But for entertainment factor, this would be an S tier weapon. For looks and sort of aesthetic, S tier, but for overall performance, I gotta put it in B. And then just like with a chainsword, I'm going to recommend some blessings here. Momentum is fantastic for keeping you up and running. However, you can also run Savage Sweep, Rampage, Wrath. Any combination of those work really well. Now moving on to the Archley's Mark 8 Combat Axe. This one's going to be nice and quick. It's going to go into C. It just, though, it is a great weapon in that it can take brutal momentum and does a lot of damage, but the moveset really lets it down. It's not quite as bad as the Mark II Combat Axe, so it's not going in F, but when it comes to combat axes, the Mark V is king, and that is our next weapon. And there's a reason I did this one separately. It's the king, not just of the combat axes, but of all melee weapons. It is well deserving of S tier when you have brutal momentum, thrust, or head taker on this. Basically, brutal momentum or anything that increases your damage. This thing kills everything. Armor, hordes, elite, whatever you need it to kill, they are dead. It does ridiculous damage, and brutal momentum allows it to cleave through hordes like they're nothing. And it has the absolute best moveset for this in the world. It's got a lot of strike downs for armor and a lot of sweeping attacks for horde. Really well made weapon. I super duper recommend you try this if you haven't already, but I'm guessing you have. This has been the S tier weapon for Zealots for a long time now, and it's going to be a while before it's dethroned. And the poor sword following that one up is the Indignatus Crusher. And for me, this weapon, though it has a butt ton of CC, has just way too low DPS for me to recommend it. I find that in Darktide, a lot of people get caught into the trap of like, oh, I'm able to knock it down, I can knock it down, I can CC it, but it's way better to kill it. Like, if whatever you are trying to knock over to stop from doing damage to you, it's better if it's just dead. Bury it in the ground. Don't just knock it over so it can get back up. And with a lot of high CC weapons in this game, I find actually you end up displacing the horde, spreading it out, making it much harder to actually blast it down with some concentrated DPS. So for me, I'm gonna have to put this in C for now until perhaps like the CC meta sees an emergence or something like that, because right now I can't see just knocking the enemy over and not killing them right away being better than just killing them. And to that effect, the one of the only 4 blessings that the Crusher can have that I'll recommend is Skull Crusher, because it's the only one that increases your damage, where every other one of them increases your impact as if you didn't already have enough. Now moving on to the Catachan Devilclaw swords, and all 3 of these are fantastic. My personal favorite is the Mark I. I know it does a little less damage, but the moveset for that one just really sings for me. However, all 3 of them are fantastic. I'm going to rank them equally, so I'm only going to put one on the board to represent that. And I think they all go right bang in the middle as B. They don't do anything particularly amazing, however, they are just good at absolutely everything, offer a very well-rounded playstyle, and honestly just feel nice to use. And if you're going to grab one of these, as far as blessing recommendations go, I think that Savage Sweep is excellent on this one, and then something to boost the damage, perhaps maybe Rampage or Shred. And last but not least, the Thoondar Hammoar. Oh boy. Definitely going to catch some flack for this one. I don't do it on purpose. I have some genuine reasoning for where I'm going to rank this one. And I'm again going to be ranking this one on C. So if you've been watching the whole video and you heard what I was saying about the Crusher, it all applies here as well. CCing enemies is not as good as killing them. And a lot of the other weapons on this list will just outright kill them instead of knocking them to the ground. Now, I will grant that this weapon has the highest single target DPS in the game. I've seen Zealots literally 2-clap a boss on Heresy, which is hilarious to see. However, comes with a lot of drawbacks. First of all, the animation lock is by and far the worst in the game. The light attack combo is puke. Honestly, the worst in the game again. But again, as a general use weapon, it doesn't do anything super fantastic, and bringing it just for that one-tap utility on bosses doesn't quite give it enough oomph to be a better weapon overall. Honestly, I want this to be the best weapon. For me, I love hammers, but I don't like the hammers in this game yet, and I really want to. So here's hoping for some buffs to the Thoondar Hammoar and the Crusher, because I want to be absolutely flattening heretics. And luckily, unlike the Crusher, this weapon actually has an absolute ton of blessings to pick from. Take any of these two and you'll probably be just fine. Avoid something that increases your impact, because honestly it already has so much, I don't see it needing any more. It says a lot about a weapon when I don't even realize it's missing from the list until I'm literally uploading the video. And that Forgotten Soul was the Chain Axe, and there's a good reason for it. It's not something I've ever been a fan of. It's very slow and clunky and has a terrible habit of latching onto enemies. And it just doesn't have the big damage numbers to offset those trade-offs. And this is not to mention the bug it has at the moment where it does latch onto an enemy, it will kind of move your camera down to an awkward angle. It's going to have to go into F until we see some changes on this weapon that just help improve the usability, or perhaps make it a lot more powerful to offset all of those negatives that it has. And for blessings, I'd recommend Head Taker and Slaughterer to at least juice up those DPS numbers. So that's the list. Is there anything that you disagree with? And, you know, if so, what is the reasoning? Where would you have moved it and why, and all of that kind of business? If you enjoyed the video, please do consider giving it a like. You can support the channel by simply hitting that subscribe button. If you want to check me out on Twitch when I start streaming, which I promise I will start very soon. I'm just trying to upgrade my equipment a little bit so you guys can get a better experience on your end, because this is not a good microphone, let's be honest. Then you can find that in the description down below. But until next time, I'll catch you on the flippity flip, and fingers crossed for a community update soon, because I'm dying out here, boys. I'm dying.